In today's video, we're going to see if it's possible, and then if it makes economical sense, to mass produce parts made out of aluminum using the Makera Carvera Air. For those who don't know, I mainly make camera gear that's 3D printed, but I'm trying to get into metal. Now, I don't need to compete with the small rigs and the newers or the big time manufacturers. I'm mainly looking to do small runs of between 5 to 100 unique products per month. Maybe if I have multiple machines, I can up that, but that's kind of the baseline. So let's go find out if it's possible by doing it. We're gonna start with a super simple product called a Nato Rail. When I first got into 3D printing, I had no intention of starting a business. I had a list of things I wanted to make for around the house and for my camera gear, and other people also wanted it. So we scaled, and now I've got, 4 printers going nonstop. Fast forward 5 years, after a lot of struggle figuring out printers, they've gotten so much better. My neighbor got an A1 Mini, started churning out products, and has an Etsy shop like within a month making sales. Totally wild. So I wanted to see what the process for that would look like on the Carvera Air. Can you scale it? What are the pain points along the way? What's the process like? Can you buy more machines and just double your output? So thankfully, after I sent them many emails, Carvera decided to give me one so I could show you guys what that process looks like. All of my thoughts about their software and their machines are my own, and they don't get to see this before it's live. So, take it with a grain of salt. Why a Nato Rail? Well, first off, it's an open standard, so the measurements and the dimensions are open. All the different companies use them, so you can use it with other accessories. And basically, it's just an essential little bit of kit. You slide your Nato clamp onto it, tighten it up, and you're good to go. So it's one of those essential things that's on a ton of different camera rigs. And it's a really good test piece for us for 4 different reasons. 1, it's really small, so we can understand the scale of production really quickly. 2, it requires a flip of the stock, so that's going to be a good test for us. 3, it's got a lot of different angles on it, so we're going to have to try out some chamfering bits, not just standard contours and pockets. And 4, they're super helpful to have around, so I can put to use all of the broken prototypes that aren't quite perfect. The next big product I have in mind is a lot more complex than this, so this is going to be a good test to see if it's possible and see if I can figure it out and if I can keep pursuing that next idea. So let's get into the C.A.M, or computer-aided manufacturing. Right out of the gate, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, which is Makera C.A.M. Makera markets it as this amazingly simple C.A.M software. Intuitive, easy to use, and AI-powered with the new Z1. However, it's not actually that good yet. It's really simple to use, but it's really limited right now. And it's missing some key features like rest machining, which only cuts the leftover material from previous paths, greatly improving efficiency and reducing machining time. I do believe that it is the software I will use in the future, especially with the successful Kickstarter campaign they just ran for the Z1, but they're competing in a billion-dollar industry against some giants like Autodesk Fusion 360, which is what I use. So thankfully, we can actually use both of these softwares intermittently. So for this project, I'll be using Fusion 360, but for simple things and for 4th axis stuff, I'll be using Makera C.A.M moving forward. For those of you following me from the 3D printing side of things, C.A.M is essentially the slicing part of the process where you're taking an STL or your design or whatever file you have and you're turning it into G code that the machines can understand. So that's the same, except just executed differently. With 3D printing, there's a few things you can control, mainly the different size nozzles, temperatures, heated bed temperatures, line widths, speeds, that kind of thing. Whereas with CNC, you have a spindle, which can spin up to 13,000 RPMs. You have a Z height that can go up and down, and you have an X and Y bed that can move back and forth. So not that different. Where the biggest difference comes in is the tools that you can use. For this project, we're going to be using a Spiral O single flute bit for metal. This is basically a square cutter that's really great for finishing and roughing and getting rid of a lot quickly. And then a chamfering bit, which basically can make perfect 45-degree angle cuts. And then we're going to be using a thread milling bit, which can make the threads inside for screw holes and that kind of thing. And then a 2-flute ball nose bit for metal, and this one is good for rounding edges. Work holding is a huge part of machining, so I'm learning very quickly. And the simplest way to start is by aligning the stock with the square in the corner and drilling some locating holes that we will put pins in. Then when we flip the stock, we know for sure that it's in the exact same place. At least that's the idea. For our product, we are going to start with the 1-flute end mill. This seems to be the best type of bit for removing as much as possible, as fast as possible. Quick side note, there are a ton of different types of tools out there, and obviously some are going to be a lot better than the ones I'm using. But for now, I've just got the ones that come with the Makera Essential Tool Kit, so that's what we're starting with. Now that we have our stock locked down, we'll start by basically removing as much of the stock around and above the part as possible, while leaving about 0.5 millimeters of stock left on the part that we will come back to with a finishing pass to make it as smooth as possible. Using the same end mill, we can run a flat pass, which we will make sure the top of the part is perfectly smooth, as the stock might not have been originally. Which brings us to our second bit, the chamfering bit. The design of this part has lots of 45-degree angles, so we can use this chamfering bit to quickly make smooth finishing passes along the 45-degree angle surface. These tool paths are meant to remove a very small amount of stock, but do it really cleanly without much chatter or imperfections. Then we will use the thread milling tool to cut out the threads for our screw. And then we are ready to flip. Using the holes, we flip the stock over and again start with the 1-flute end mill to remove as much stock as quickly as possible. The second side is essentially the same as the top side, however the main difference is that we will be leaving these tabs on the edge to make sure that we aren't milling a loose piece of metal ruining our product. This is how it's supposed to go at least, but as with any new endeavor, there is a ton of learning along the way. The learning curve for this process feels more difficult than slicing a 3D print. Although when I first got started with 3D printing, I remember being so frustrated with my Ender 3 that I nearly threw it across the room. So maybe I'm just used to the overly refined software that is current slicers. Either way, we now have a prototype that is machined well enough for my standards, and I'll keep refining these tool paths until they are perfect, but for now, this is a good enough prototype to explore mass producing with. Originally, I purchased 2 pieces of stock, one for testing and then one for my first mass production. I quickly learned that my plan of cutting them out like this really close together wouldn't work because there's literally zero space on the top and the bottom. And I'm learning that you need to keep the piece held in the stock a little bit better. So I had to turn them sideways. So instead of fitting 10 in my one piece of stock, I can fit 6. Basically what I'm saying is that I'm learning a lot, and if I bought my stock just a little bit bigger, I would have been able to use up all of the available space. So I can definitely get more efficient with this. Using Fusion, you can simply create a pattern which will do the exact same tool paths for all 6 of the parts in the most efficient way. This was actually super simple, and I'm surprised how well it works, and it's another reason why going with Fusion for this process was the right move. The machining time will be about 9 hours total, netting us with 6 parts. Using the 200-watt spindle, let's assume at max speed for that entire time, will cost us 23 cents. I had to double check this as it seems really low, but for me in Vancouver, BC, that's the price. So to run this machine for 9 hours per day for a full month, every single day, that would cost a total of $7 Canadian. So the electricity costs are very small due to the 200-watt spindle. Assuming that with a better optimized stock, I would be able to fit 8 of these products onto a $20 chunk of metal instead of 6, that price in raw materials would cost about $2.50 per. Not bad. But I'm not quite done yet. Now that the CNC is done, we've got our finished products sitting in the stock. I'm gonna have to cut out the edges, do a bit of post-processing, and then get to powder coating. Let's get to it. Not gonna lie, I'm a little intimidated yet again, as per usual with these new projects, but I picked up a powder coating gun, a whole bunch of different powders, oven, an air compressor, some safety equipment, and I have an air purifier for the laser engraver. I'm gonna build a little makeshift powder coating spot because I don't want powder to get everywhere in my studio. And we're gonna give this a try. I even have a thermal gun which reads the temperature of the surface of things, which has been quite interesting to see the temperature of things. Let's get to it.
Safety, good to go.
The process of powder coating is actually pretty simple. You use a gun that shoots out a cloud of powder that has an electric charge, so it becomes attracted to the metal part. Then, once the part is fully covered in the powder, you place it in the oven for about 20 minutes, making sure it stays at 400 degrees. And just like that, we have a powder-coated Nato Rail. I was actually floored with how nicely this came out. The inside edges look terrible, but for my first ever try, it's not bad at all. In the future, I plan to build out a more permanent and better lit powder coating booth so I can see these little edges better. So now that my prototype is done, I figured I'd just go straight ahead and do the next 6 right away. These ones turned out much better, and 2 of them I think are even good enough to sell. I wasn't sure how much the paint job would clean up the finish of the machining, so I just rolled with it, but it definitely did not clean everything up. I'll have to refine the tool paths to make the edges and corners a bit smoother, but that shouldn't be too difficult to figure out. So what's the final count? If I break it down into an 8 to 10 hour long day, I think I can reasonably machine 7 of these in one big piece of stock in that time and powder coat it. It would cost me about $3 to $4 total in stock, electricity, and powder. But of course that doesn't take into account my time, so we're gonna leave pre-production out of this for now and just focus on the actual making of the part. So in that 8 to 10 hour day of actual focus time, I think it would take about an hour in tool changing on the Makera, setting the stock up and all of that, and then powder coating, post-processing, and popping them into some shipping boxes. I've estimated about 1 hour total for all of that. At $35 an hour, that would make each part cost about $5 an hour in time, which brings our total price up to, let's say, $8 to $10 per, which makes sense because that's what you can find one of these for on AliExpress. But if you have a more unique design and maybe a more niche fit for a specific camera, I'm seeing these on Amazon for more like $30 to $40 and even upwards of $80 for a bit bigger. So with the right product fit in the right market, I think this could definitely work. And I'm really excited to use this process and this finished look to make my next product because it is a more unique market fit. So overall, I think this project is definitely a success. The Carvera Air did really well. So once you get past the learning curve, I think there's definitely a process and a workflow where you could be churning out constant products. I'm excited about where this technology is going, and I'm gonna be along for the ride. I'll see you guys in the next one.